Elliot Loney, welcome to the Dylan Friends podcast, my friend. I have been looking forward to this one for a while.
Mate, thanks for having me on, man. Likewise. I've been enjoying the podcast, mate, and I've got to say it's an honour to be here.
Oh, thank you very much. It means a lot. Now, mate, I'm a big fan of your work, and I suppose sometimes what I like to do is set the scene of how I first became a fan. And it's a funny one because, look, a lot of people are going to know this, but back in the day of school, and I think nearly 99.9% of people would have seen a lot of your content on Facebook, impersonations, comedic genius, as I would say. But some of the stuff you were doing early days, and especially one that I know I love in Mr. Parker, that was how I first came to know of Elliot Loney and his impersonations. And guys, for anyone who hasn't seen it, we're going to have the links of all this stuff. But mate, it's been a pretty crazy ride from these videos to now turning into, you know, an up and coming comedian yourself. It's been crazy. How have you found the process?
Oh, mate, that's a great first question. I'll tell you what, it's been a wild ride. You know what I mean? Because I guess my journey wasn't traditional in the sense of what's been the norm for a lot of comedians in the past. Like in terms of you bring up the 9As as an interesting point of view because that opened me up to a whole new fan base. But initially I started with a Bear Grylls impersonation, Man vs Metro, in 2013, which then led me to do stand up the year after, and then after that I started. I think it was about 2015. I started doing those Mr. Parker videos, but that got me into a whole new audience of footy. Like-minded people who love sport and all can relate to that quintessential sports coach, which is Mr. Parker. So
we will gauge a lot into that later on. But it is funny because, as again, I was thinking about it earlier, and I think looking back to social media and what it's become, and now there's no traditional route in getting to where you want to be. You would have been nearly up there with one of the first people to be able to actually successfully start, a career through comedy and social media. Like, I don't think that anyone sort of had done that prior to you. Is that, would you think that's something that's true? Like, was there anyone else doing what you were doing at that time?
Yeah, I think back when I first started, so probably about 2013, the only other person I can think of that was sort of a pioneer in the space was Alex Williamson, the loosest Aussie bloke. Yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with his work. I thought a lot of people have seen his stuff over the years. So we collabed, I think, mid-2013, just after Man vs Metro first went viral, and he was the only other person at the time. But now, obviously, it's such a loaded space. Like, everyone is trying to, become a big online entertainer before anything else. And back then, it was kind of like no one got around it. Like, no one really understood it. So it's interesting to see how far it's come.
Yeah, and I suppose going through that, obviously doing these online videos, and then the correlation into getting into on actual stage comedy. Like, comedy is one of those things that's, look, I love it. Like, I absolutely love going to comedy shows. It's such an awesome sort of form of escapism, being able to watch someone and just laugh and take your mind off things. But how was that transition come about? Because it's something, I think of footy, right? You play footy in a team, you go into a draft, you get drafted to a team, and you become a professional. With comedy, how does that even occur? Like, obviously, you've got to establish you're funny, for one. Then you've got to somehow, just put yourself out there, start gigging, and then do you just get picked up into some form of, I don't know, live stages? Like, I just don't feel like it's such a clear-cut, pathway. It seems like a real hustle career that you've just got to persist.
Yeah, no, it's true, man. It's such a weird, industry. There's no real traditional way of going about it in terms of, a linear pathway. Everyone's pathway that you speak to seems to be different. But yeah, look, the way that you start out is you've got to go to as many open mics as you can with your first 5-minute, 3-minute bit, and basically just say that as many times as you can until you sort of find your voice. And, the first few gigs you bomb unconditionally. It's just, you kind of got to get used to it. And it's quite, humiliating, but it's also you grow from that as well. It makes you a better person. When you fully tank, and you tank hard in front of a lot of people, or even if it's 2 or 3 people and you think you're funny, you know, it makes you really like, look, you know, you got to look inside yourself. You got to be like internal, and you've got to really like work that out, man. And it's like the journey of every comedian. So that's sort of the process. And even the top tier comedians, like the best of the best, you know, they might write jokes that, you know, they think are killer, and even they bomb if they're new and they haven't trialed that material before. So there's no real like, you know, you never feel completely safe up there unless you've done the jokes, you know, 100 or 1,000 times to have the confidence in your material to know, okay, I'm going to say this and I know how the audience is going to react.
What's that like though with bombing? Because it's something that nearly, you know, thinking about it now, it can be extremely harsh. Like you said, you're on a stage by yourself. People are there. They're expecting gags. And if they don't know you and it's early in your career, they don't know what to expect. Like, have you had some of those stages where you've just got up and they've just not gone the way you wanted to?
Oh, man, absolutely. Like, you know, in having said that, like, I am pretty hard on myself. Like, I've always been my own harshest critic. Like, I have had gigs where I've done very well, but I've also had my fair share of gigs where, like, man, it makes me shudder to think about it. Like, some gigs I still think about. It gives me the shakes just to, like, even talk about it. You know, I gigged in front of Julia Gillard when she was the Prime Minister of Australia, and like she was sitting like, you know, only just a few tables away from me, and like her like piercing gaze is like cemented in my brain. You know what I mean? Like I can't get rid of that. But you know, when you bomb in front of like 3,000 people, as I did in that particular occasion, you know, that is character building stuff. And I think every comedian needs that. Like you need it in order to be, you know, considered good or improve. Because, you know, if you never bomb, you'll never learn.
Yeah, no, I can definitely vouch for that. I don't think it's in comedy. I think that's just in life. Jesus, I've bombed a lot of times. I've bombed on the MCG in terms of kicked bombs, but I've also bombed out in terms of hitting 45s, missing them, and getting subbed off. So I can definitely relate to that. Something again that with comedy and comedians and putting yourself out there on stage, and something that is my highlight. And you know, you get caught in these YouTube sort of traps sometimes of just like watching comedian versus heckler. Is that actually, you know, is that like a comedian's worst nightmare? Do you actually go into you know, shows like planning for that in case something happens? Have you got like comebacks ready to go? Have you experienced it? Like how can that all come apart?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question, Dill, because like, you know, I feel like there's a fair misunderstanding with the general public on this particular topic, because everyone's like, oh, it'd be so scary to have someone heckle you. Like, what would you do if you're on stage and someone, you know, is interrupting you, yelling out stuff? And I think the thing that to be mindful of is something that I wish I knew earlier on when I first started out is, you know, when you're on stage, you hold the power. And most of the time, if people have paid to come and see you, or they're there to see you, you know, they want to see you do well, and they want to see you get through your act. So if someone's like, you know, drunk and disorderly and saying some outrageous stuff and, you know, disrupting you, which has happened to me before, you know, sometimes you just get someone who's just out there just to, you know, they think they're being funny, but they can't see themselves and they're just saying some crazy stuff. You know, it's important just to realize that, you know, like anything you say in that moment, if you decide to take them on, you're always going to have the upper hand. And like, you know, from my own meandering experience, when I've had a heckler and I've like decided I'm going to tear this bloke to shreds, the audience gets behind me, as opposed to if you ignore it and you continue to ignore it, it just becomes a bigger problem. So like, you've almost got to tackle it head on, unless, you know, it becomes, I mean, I've known comedians who've been bottled before, and, you know, obviously in those circumstances, you know, they need to be thrown out of the venue, and you have security for those reasons. But, you know, if it's harmless and they're just really drunk, you know, usually the crowd will work in your own favour. You can get the crowd to shut them up. Yeah.
What's the Australian comedy scene like, man? Like, I suppose, again, it's hard to sort of imagine, because I think as a comedian, you're a single person. So you're by yourself. It's not a team. Like, you don't have really anyone else to like probably work with. I don't know, maybe you do. But like, when you go to gigs, is it like really competitive between comedians? Like, obviously you want to be funnier than the other guy, but like, what I probably mean is like, is it a competitive scene? Like, are there people in comedy? There's obviously going to be good ones, but is there ones as well that aren't so great?
100%, mate. Yeah, that's another great observation, Dill. I mean, like, there are definitely guys out there that I think have the wrong mentality when it comes to like comedy as a whole. Like the way that I see it is like, I see it as like we're a pretty small niche industry of people, and I think like, you know, one person's success isn't necessarily going to take away from another person's success. Like everyone's success at the end of the day is good for comedy. So there are people out there that I think like will talk behind other people's backs or put another comedian down for not doing well. And I'm just not about that, man. Like I hate that, you know, like I'm the first person to get around someone when they bomb, or the first person to like, you know, try and help someone who's just starting out, because like I know what that's like. And I think it's important to try and, you know, foster and nurture that skill, because a lot of people don't really have the courage to get out there. And, you know, we want comedy to be thriving in Australia and in the world. And, you know, if people are creating this toxic environment where they're talking behind other people's backs and having a go at people for having a crack, I mean, I'm not about that, you know, like you have to have a crack to start and be good. And, yeah, it's a shame. There are people out there like that in the comedy space, but most of the people that I hang out with, most of the people that I've met through comedy, they're really good people, man. They're some of the best people you'll meet, but there are a few shockers, like any industry or any sporting club. There's always a couple of shockers.
Yeah, there is. It's that comes a part of the parcel. Mate, something else with comedy that I suppose has been made super hard these days, and it's interesting to get your opinion on this, because obviously you're the master at it, but political correctness is something that, in a way, I don't know, but I think like it actually can be not ruining comedy, but it can be making it very hard to probably get some jokes across. Like, how have you found that in the comedy scene these days? Like, is there things that now you can't even really joke about on stage, and if you do, like, what happens? Like, is, you know, the risk of offending someone or offending, you know, a certain organisation, like it must be hard to sort of find the balance of saying something funny but also be in the same, you know, not too offensive. Like, is that something that happens?
Man, this is something that I'm like so passionate about, and I've got to be super careful about what I say, especially in this in this climate. But I think recently I've been delving into this a lot more, because I've faced a lot of problems with applying for funding for my animation, the prestigious 9As, which you obviously touched on earlier.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that tipped me over the edge is when I recently went in to apply for funding, the only reason they could give me for not giving me the money to make the animation for development funding was, you're doing an impersonation of Rafael Nadal, and that's racist. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's okay. And, you know, this person was saying that's problematic, that's racist, you know, go back, revisit it, sort it out. And I sort of like hung up the phone, and I was just thinking about that, and I sat on that for a while. And then I started to think, I was like, man, Rafael Nadal has seen my impersonation of him. Like, I know for a fact that he laughs at it. Like, I know for a fact that he sits with his teammates and he's like members of his team, like Uncle Tony and stuff, and they watch it and they laugh. So if he's not offended by it, why would someone who works in this bureaucracy take the liberty upon themselves to deem that as offensive, when the actual individual that I'm parodying doesn't find any offense in it whatsoever? And I think that's where it's lost, you know, it's lost a little bit of something for me, because it's like, you know, you can't even be offensive in the pursuit of being inoffensive anymore. And I think that's something that I'm really starting to realize, and I think it's important for a lot of comedians to understand that, you know, some progressiveness is a good thing, but intent is the most important thing. And if that gets lost, you know, then it's difficult to find what the line is and how to cross it in the pursuit of being humorous. The last thing that I'll say on that is, like, a lot of the comedians that I look up to, Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, you know, even Stephen Fry recently has come out to talk about it. He's a very smart guy. Like, you know, a lot of these people, they're not in America, you know, these American comics, they're no longer doing college campuses because of the fear of political correctness. And I think that's sad, because, you know, they don't want to perform for the colleges anymore, because they're too scared of being labelled as, you know, a whole host of different things. And, you know, I think it was George Carlin that said, you know, comedy is often finding what the line is and then deliberately crossing it. Now, I understand that progressiveness is obviously going to change and contend with, you know, different issues that will emerge in the future and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? Like it seems to be ad absurdum when, you know, someone is just telling me, oh, you can't impersonate Rafael Nadal anymore, man. Like, that's just racist. You know what I mean? Well, okay. When is it going to be not, like, will it be not okay for me to impersonate Bear Grylls or, you know, like Morgan Freeman or like, you know, what's okay, what isn't? Like, it's like, you know, it's just becoming really confusing and convoluted, and it's hard being a comedian, you know, like all we're trying to do is make people laugh. And, you know, I think, yeah, for me, it's I don't know, I'm frightened. I'm frightened of what it might do to comedy in the long term.
It is a hard one, but yeah, bloody hell, I don't envy comedians in that aspect, because it is such a hard industry to be able to find a good balance of what you can and can't really do and touch on.
Absolutely, yeah, and increasingly more so. So it's it's a really difficult one to answer, because, you know, as we said earlier, you know, there are a lot of things that I think are really great. Like, not all political correctness is bad, but I think, you know, there is a line, and it's difficult to define what the line is.
We touched on Rafa just in that, and that is something you are very well known for, and also your work with the Australian Open. You're very good mates with Thanasi Kokkinakis and Nick Kyrgios as well, who you've you know, been able to form some really good relationships with in tennis. You were actually quite the player, I've heard yourself.
Oh yeah, probably. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, you did. You said, I'm not coming on unless you mention this.
Yeah, look, man, like, tennis, without a doubt, was my first love. And, like, I genuinely believe that it saved my life, because, you know, from the age, I think to the age of about 10, I was a massive gimp, mate. Like, I didn't play any sport. Like, I wasn't interested in it, you know, like, it just didn't tickle my fancy at all. And then I remember from the first day I picked up my first tennis racket, I started quite late. I think I was about 10, and I just fell in love with the sport, man. And, like, from there, it sort of enabled me to start pursuing other sports as well. And I became, like, really disciplined, and it was the first thing that I loved and, like, couldn't wait to do when the school bell rang. You know, I just wanted to hit the tennis court and play. And then, you know, I started playing a bit of footy and, like, a bit of hockey and, like, a whole bunch of different sports, like, even dabbled in a bit of cricket. And, you know, all those things I wouldn't have done if it wasn't for, you know, picking up my first tennis racket. So, yeah, I'm really thankful for that. And, yeah, I got to play at, like, a pretty good junior level. I never got the elusive ATP point that would class me as a professional, but I did beat some guys who went on to play at professional level and beat a few guys with ATP points. So, but yeah, I wasn't anywhere near as talented as some of the guys you mentioned before, like Kokkinakis or Kyrgios. But obviously, I keep close tabs on the sport, and I'm still very passionate about it for sure.
Man, it's a funny one, tennis, isn't it? Because it's such a big game in Australia at the right time of year. Obviously, Australian Open time, it just is. Everyone goes out. Tennis courts are booked everywhere. Everyone wants to play. Everyone loves it. But it also has a bit of like, I feel a little bit of a stigma to it, of just, you know, the people involved sometimes. It doesn't feel like everyone's on the same page. Like, it's very separate and guys like that. And I know it'd be good to get your opinion on this, because you're really good mates with these guys, obviously, like Kyrgios, who's obviously he's dividing in the public, but what he's like as a bloke. And I've had the pleasure of listening to your podcast, Elliot Loney podcast, everyone listening on YouTube and on Wooshka. And where else is it? Everywhere else?
Yeah, Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. Thanks for the fucking
make sure you tune into that and listen to this episode, because Kyrgios, man, I am so obsessed with him, and I've always wanted to chat with him about his persona, because he just doesn't care. Like, I feel like, I don't know this, but I just feel like he just does not give a shit about anything but, you know what he's doing, and he doesn't, like, sort of let the outside noise really get in. But what's he like as a dude? What's he like as an actual bloke?
Man, he's such a nice guy. I think, like, you know, the media misconstrued Nick a lot, or have misquoted him, I feel, in the past. Like, obviously there's some things that he's done that have been controversial, and he'll be the first to, you know, take ownership of some of the things that he's done in the past. But, you know, once you get to know him, and once he decides to let you into the fold, so to speak, I've never had an issue with him ever. He's never been anything but super kind and super generous to me, and, like, a lot of the people that we've hung out with. And people that even I've introduced to the group, you know, like some of my mates have been like, Nick, this is so-and-so. And, you know, because he knows that I'm mates with them, he'll full get around them, you know, like he's just like, he's such a good guy, man. And like, it's a sort of a shame because I feel like I've seen what he has to deal with and like sort of the level of fame that he's attained. And like, you know, it must be hard for the bloke, man. But like, you know, at the end of the day, like he's just a good human being. Like I've seen him do some great things. And, you know, I'm just like, why isn't this publicised more? You know what I mean? Like what I'm seeing right now, like this should be what the media is talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. And it's funny though, because I actually think that he has sort of divided, you know, people good and bad. But I think that especially of late, because he is a superstar, I love it watching him play, like no matter what. Like I don't really... The other stuff, like he puts bums on seats. Like you can't say when Kyrgios is watching, you want to watch him. Like he's
Absolutely
special. Like he's so good to watch. The personality also as well, the unpredictability of not knowing what he's going to do. I think he's a superstar, man. And as I said, we just need to embrace it for what he is because he's doing good things for the sport. And in a sport like tennis, where it's probably not as dominated as you know, AFL or soccer or rugby, like he's, you know, probably inspiring that many kids to get involved.
Well, you know, it's interesting you saying that because, you know, I know that he is a polarising guy and you know, you flag that, but as you said, you can't not watch him. Like he's so magnanimous. You just look at him on the screen, you're like, wow, I just want to see what happens. What's he going to do? You don't know if he's going to go out there and break 12 rackets or go out there and play some of the best tennis you've ever seen. And like, you know, this is coming from non-biased, not just because I'm mates with him and I really like Nick, but I actually have come to realise and genuinely believe he might just be the most naturally talented tennis player I've ever seen. And, you know, I've seen him do stuff on a tennis court where I'm just kind of like, that it just defies physics. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like he is a freak of nature. And so... yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he gets so many views and people want to tune in to watch him play because he's just box office.
No, it's good, man. Look, massively into your career is comedy and it is stand-up, but the other side of it as well is the impersonations. And that's, like, to be honest, man, you know, and we got in contact about nearly a month ago now, and I knew you did, like, you know, Rafael Nadal and a few tennis guys and girls and whatnot, but I didn't actually realise how good this was. Like, it's actually incredible. And I don't want to say it's a talent. Well, it is a talent, but I don't want to say, I hate saying that it's talent because I can imagine it's not just talent that goes into this. Like, how much work goes into developing one of these voices? Because just for example, I'm going to read out, like there's a list of about 50 of them here. I won't read them all out, but some of my famous favourites, obviously Bear Grylls, Morgan Freeman, Mark Wahlberg, Hughesy, Donald Trump, Gary V, who is great, obviously Bruce McAvaney. Like, man, there's that many there, and they're all so different. Like, how much work goes into that, bro?
Yeah, I think some impersonations are definitely more intuitive than others. Like some voices, you know, for example, I remember the first time I saw Bear Grylls, I was sitting on the couch with my mate and, you know, I just like watched the TV and then like, I was just like, oh, you know, I'm Bear Grylls. Right. And I was like, wow, I can actually talk like Bear. Like, it's actually there. I didn't even realise, but, you know, I can speak like Bear Grylls. You know, like, sometimes you just turn on the TV and it's just there. It's weird. But other times, you know, I have to work on a little bit. For example, Donald Trump. You just brought Donald Trump up before. The first few times I did Donald wasn't great. And then after a while, I started to get, you know, Donald has a little bit of raspiness in his voice. You know, that's Donald Trump, the greatest president. You know, when you can get that raspiness, you can get a little bit of Donald. And you know you got Donald when you got that raspy Trump. You know, there's certain nuances, certain intricacies to each voice that only get better through practice and time. But my rule is if I can get it somewhat close in the first like 2 or 3 attempts, then I know that I can refine it. But if I can't get it close in the first 2 or 3 attempts, there's no point in me even trying to refine it because I've never been able to do that.
It's funny, isn't it? Because, like, you know, we were chatting off air about this, but things like Donald Trump and one of my favorites, like Gary V, like they're so different. And then there's other ones that you just, and you nail those too, but then there's other ones that you just cannot hit at all. So like, it's so funny that there's like you can absolutely nail two of them, but then there's some that just aren't like there. Like it's crazy how you can just be so different.
Yeah, it's weird, man. Like, I think in terms of like a lot of impersonators I've seen, like other impersonators, most of them are overseas. There's not too many of us here in Australia, which is kind of weird. I might actually be the only one. Yeah, it's interesting, man, because like, you know, there's some impersonators, like pretty much all of them can do like a Robert De Niro, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
You know, they're like the staple impersonation, and Sylvester Stallone, but I can't do any of those. No matter how hard I try, and just about any impersonator can. Every impersonator, even like drunk blokes you meet at the pub. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, it's funny that I can't get close to that, but I can do like, you know, as you said, Morgan Freeman and then Elmo, which is like the two most different voices you could ever, you know. So,
which ones would be your favourite to perform, and your highest quality ones that you love bringing out?
Oh man, well, you know, obviously like a bit of Dave Hughes. Yeah, Hughesy's outrageous because he's got the face as well. Yeah, Hughesy's eyes pop out. You know. He's a ridiculous unit. He's got big bubbly eyes like you know what I mean? Like those eyes just pop out, don't they? Dylan Friends, what an outrageous show, yeah? So, you know, obviously Hughesy. Hughesy's not a bad one.
So, like, I actually can't even tell the difference there at all. Like, that is
Yeah, I remember I busted it out for Hughesy once. He's like, that sounds something like me. It's not bad, but it doesn't sound anything like me, does it? Yeah, so yeah, there's that. But trying to think what else. Yeah, like Morgan Freeman. You know, I might need to get close to the microphone here, but you know, sometimes I bring my voice down like this, and I'll talk like Morgan Freeman. And you know, I love talking like Morgan Freeman because Morgan Freeman has a truly magnanimous voice. Reminds me of Shawshank Redemption and my friend Andy Dufresne. Listen to the Dylan Friends podcast, the #1 podcast in the whole of the world. There you go. So, you know,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, there's like a few different ones. But yeah, I think those two I really enjoyed doing. But yeah, obviously like Rafa and all the tennis ones and stuff like that, and the ones that I'm probably most known for. But yeah, you know, there's a big contrast. There's actually a big impression reel on YouTube if your listeners or viewers are interested in checking it out.
Elliot Loney on YouTube, which we'll have the link of that in the show notes as well, guys. It's unbelievable. It's mate, you've got a massive the beautiful thing about your caper is it's so international. Like you've got a massive scope for it, you know, like you've got an incredible base, and your videos are doing absolutely killing it on your YouTube page, which is awesome.
No, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I think it's like consistency for YouTube people. You know, out there, if there's anyone out there aspiring to get amongst it in the community. One thing that I've found, and one thing I've noticed with all my peers who are doing really well on YouTube, is consistency, and that's probably something that I've lacked. So I'm trying to get better at that. Just being super consistent. You know, a video or two a week is the key to building the audience, which I'm sure you know as well.
No, not really. I don't know anything about it.
Come
on. Mate, this is just going back a little bit. Was there a moment, like early days, that you realised that this was something that you were good at, impersonating? Like, is this something you realised when you're at school, like, or, you know, you're a kid, were you impersonating teachers? Like, did you get yourself into trouble? Has it come into favour at any stage? Like, is there anything there that's really been a time where this has come in useful?
All the time, man. And, you know, it's definitely come in useful, but you know, going back to what you were saying just now, like as a kid, I've always sort of been able to do this, and I've always been able to manipulate my voice and, like, you know, just kind of impersonate different people, whether it be celebrities or like classmates or like, you know, like there's like an infamous story within my friendship group of I had a mate, and in year 8 he was dating this girl, and he was too afraid to break up with her. He couldn't actually do it. So I could do a ripping impersonation of this bloke. So I actually called his misso at the time and broke up with her as him. So he didn't have to do the But then he decided he didn't want to break up with her. So he called her back and had to convince her that he wanted her back, but she didn't believe him because she was like, you know, a typical year 8 relationship. I think they've been dating for about 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, but probably hadn't spoke in person. Yeah.
and he was distraught. I don't think he spoke to me for about a week, but he commissioned me for the contract. Like he said, do it. You know what I mean? I think he gave me a free sandwich or something, or a sausage roll from the Tucky, But that stuff like that. I've been doing it for years. Just like silly things, prank calls in high school, all that kind of stuff. I was a bit of a mischief maker. I used to take the piss, and use this skill set for the greater good, so to speak.
Mate, I want to put you to the test because there's 2 impersonations that I love, and there's 2 of my mates that I need to send messages to. We won't call them, but they will be tuning into this podcast because they always do, and I hope they will, and they love you more than they love me. But I think Daniel Gorringe is one of those people. Dan... As we know, he's a good friend of the show. He struggled. He played a lot of thirds footy. And what I was thinking is Mr. Parker, who is one of my favourite characters of yourself, we can call up Dan and offer him a contract in the prestigious 9As and how that would sort of go about. But firstly, before we get into that, I want to sort of set the scene. And there is a funny bit of a backstory and context to Mr. Parker, who he is, because... The reason I love this is because we've all had a coach, whether it be playing footy, netball, cricket, that is Mr. Parker. And we can relate to everything he says and how serious he takes the 9As.
Absolutely. So you want me to do it now? Are we calling him right now?
No, I want you to explain who Mr. Parker is first. And then what we'll do is just, if you were going to be speaking to Goz and offering him the contract...
Okay, gotcha. I was getting worried. I was like, does he have to cut? It's like the Hulk in Avengers, you know what I mean? I got to get myself ready. I'm like, far out, mate. Do I take the serum now? Like, does someone have to hit me in the face? Like, you know what I mean? So Mr. Parker, like a lot of people have asked me, what's the inspiration behind Mr. Parker? Surely he's this bloke, or surely he's based on this bloke. But I think he's just like a mesh of all the different kind of psycho sports coaches that I've seen throughout my adolescence. You know what I mean? Like there's just so many nut job, coaches in sport, especially school sport. And like, upon reflection, when I think back to it, I just kind of, because, as you get older, you start to realise certain things that you didn't necessarily think about at all when you were a kid. And, it's not helped by the fact we're in isolation now. I'm thinking about some weird things in those showers in the morning, you know what I mean? And I think, I was just kind of casting my mind back and going, Jesus, I copped a spray in, 8Cs footy from that bloke. But, why? Fucking hell, mate. I'm clearly not good at football. I clearly can't kick over a jam tin. I shirk contests.
I don't even want to be here.
I don't even want to be there. You know what I mean? Exactly. I'd rather be sleeping in. Why are you so enthusiastic about it? But for him, in that moment, it was like a grand final, with 150,000 people at the MCG. So it was just I don't know, man. It's so weird that they take it so seriously, and there are characters like that, and I think that's where the absurdism lies. That's what's so funny about it. It's the prestigious 9As, but to this particular bloke, to Mr. Parker, it's the most important thing in his entire world. That's all that matters to him. Nothing matters apart from the 9As.
And he was a club hero himself, wasn't he? He was a reigning best and fairest winner at the
Gundi Jundarup Galars. Yeah, so there's a bit of a backstory there. I've written a production document for each of the characters. He never once shirked a contest. Severely hampered by rapidly deteriorating knees. He pulled out one last massive, Herculean effort. I think he amassed 43 disposals in a half, running off the half-back flank. It was unheard of stuff. So he's a ridiculous unit.
So if Mr. Parker wanted Dan in the 9As, where I think, to be honest, I'm not even sure if Goz would get a game in the 9As, but if he did, he's a big busting bloke. I want you to give a Mr. Parker pitch to Dan to come down and play with the prestigious 9As.
All right, I might need to stand up with this, Mr. Parker. I don't even know. You probably... Actually, maybe I'll just sit back there. I don't know why I did that. Basically, if Dan Gorringe was standing in front of Mr. Parker, I'd imagine it would go something like this. Oh, yeah, look at that big spaghetti noodle beanpole, Daniel Gorringe. Oh, yeah, I know he's been on Big Brother, but I know he loves his footy.
I like the way he goes about. He's got a powerful big physique and he loves getting his ass out on Instagram, doesn't he? Oh yeah, he does. Powerful gluteus maximus with big deltoids, powerful serratus anterior and juicy biceps. Dan Corrins, how would you like to play for the prestigious 9As, you alpaca thoroughbred psycho wrecking ball of pure malice intent? Yeah! Now get in the freckle now and fuck some kids up, you big psycho! Yeah!
And then I imagine he would say something like, you know, mate, I'm a fully grown man. I can't get in there with a bunch of, you know, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids.
I don't give a fuck, Dan. Does it look like I give a shit? Get out there and fuck things up, mate!
What do I get for it, though, mate? Like, what do I actually get for doing this? You haven't offered me anything.
I've offered you glory. I've offered you 9A prestigious fucking premiership glory.
Oh, shit. Oh, my God. To be honest, I think, you know, not to be cruel on Dan, but that would probably be the highlight of his career anyway. So well done. Look, again, he'll hear that and he'll want to get in touch.
Great.
The last one that I want to try with this is we've all got a mate that we love and we love him to death. But as much as we love him, we also just want to beat the shit out of him. And they're those, you know, those blokes that you love them, but if they weren't your mate, you'd just want to bash them, like those sort of friends. Tommy Sheridan is that one of mine. One of my best mates, but I'd love to just lay one on his chin. So basically, this one, I want, if possible, to line up a Conor McGregor and what he'd do to Tommy Sheridan in the octagon.
Of course. Well, I'd imagine if Conor McGregor was going to size up Tommy Sheridan, he'd probably say something like this.
As far as I'm concerned, you know, Tommy Sheridan is stuck in the mud, you know. He's a fucking Luna Park looking, fucked up looking goober, you know what I mean? Like, he is just asking to have his fucking big chompers knocked out. And I don't care where we fight, you know. I will fight him in a decahedron. I will fight him in a square. I will fight him in a fucking triangle or an oblong. I don't give a fuck, you know. As far as I'm concerned, I will knock him out any day in any arena. You just named a word because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, he is a fucking lantern. Not too bright and need to be carried, you know. And at the end of the day, I'm going to knock him out with my left hand and he's going to hit the deck and he will not wake up. And a lot of people will thank me because of the amount of shit that comes out of his mouth. At least I will be able to shut him the fuck up for a little while. And I can see you smiling because I know you want to shut him up because he's a fucking dick. And I'm going to knock some sense into his fucking tiny little skull. And when he wakes up, he will not have any brain cells left. And that's it.
Oh, God, that one brought me a lot of joy. And I'd love to see that. So thank you so much. Gee whiz, he's going to love that too. Because in all honesty, Tommy couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. Not that that's important because we don't condone fighting. But thank you, Connor, for that. Mate, on the more... Geez, I'm struggling to transition from these two topics, to be honest. But on the more, and well done, in the more serious side of comedy, and I've spoken about this a fair bit in terms of my journey, I suppose, in terms of like footy and person and, you know, your professional, like, you know, your work life versus who you are and separating the person versus a persona. And I think as a comedian, that could really be up there with one of the hardest things because when you see a comedian, they're always up and about, they're happy, they're, you know, going off their tree and laughing, and when people would meet you in real life, they'd expect you to just be as high as energy and telling jokes as what they are. How have you gone on a professional level of being able to separate you as like Elliot Loney as a comedian versus Elliot Loney as a person?
Man, that's a great question, Dill. And it's a really difficult one to answer because I don't think that I've actually dealt with it too well. In terms of like, there's been times where, you know, I've been traveling and I've done a few gigs and stuff and I've had a few late nights and it's a really strange feeling. It's hard to like sort of summarize, you know what I mean? Because you're doing these gigs, you're performing in front of all these people. It's like that instant gratification. You know, you're touching them. You feel like you're having an impact. But, you know, then you go home and like, you know, you don't necessarily meet these people. They're kind of faceless in a way. And like, it's a strange feeling because there's a great high when you're on stage. And then when you go, like, there's like this empty void feeling. When you go home and you're just like, you know, sitting on the hotel bed and just like looking at the clock, you're like, well, what do I do now? It's a strange feeling. I can't summarize it, but it's a very lonely existence. But I think one of the coping mechanisms that's helped me is because I played so much tennis as a kid and as a young bloke growing up. I had that individualism sort of figured out in a way. Like I was used to that sort of nomadic lifestyle of traveling, being in hotels, traveling solo, not really having a team around me, and figuring out how to bring myself up. But in having said that, it also helps having like 55, 60 alter egos that I can chat to when the chips are down, just in the hotel room. But yeah, it's definitely really difficult. But I think the thing that helps is just you know, try and be active. I've led an active lifestyle. Like usually when something like that happens, I'll just go for a run or like just try and do something to take my mind off it, because you know you can feel the demons, man. You can feel the demons. Like I've been in times where like I've been sitting in the hotel room after a gig and I'm just like far out. Like I can feel the inner golem, you know, like I'm rocking back and forth. I'm like, fuck, what's happening to me? And like, so I can understand why so many comedians, you know, do, you know, face depression at some point in their lives, because it's hard, man. Like it's a weird thing to describe, and it's, unless you've done comedy and unless you've felt that feeling, it's a really difficult one to sort of explain. I mean, I don't think I've done a very good job explaining it myself, but it's very hard to talk about.
Do you ever think much about your impact that you can have on someone? Like, is that something that gives you massive like gratification in terms of like being a comedian and being yourself? Like you know, you do these skits and you do these performances where someone can be having, you know, one of the worst days of all time. They chuck on one of your videos for, you know, X amount of time and it can change their mood and it can change their outlook on things. Is that something that like you actually think about?
Yeah, man. To be honest with you, that's probably the only reason why I haven't quit. Like in terms of, there's been times where like the chips have been down and like I've been like, what am I doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's, you know, the thing that I struggle with the most with the comedy thing is like, you know, the money's not consistent. It's like, you know, it's hard to sort of know where your next paycheck's coming from, especially someone like myself who does a lot of corporate work through the impersonations. Because when it rains, it pours, but then you have like months where you're probably not doing much. So, you know, when the chips are down, you're not getting much work or things aren't happening. It's kind of like, what am I doing? Like, I'm better off just doing a trade or getting a desk job or just like working a 9 to 5, like having some stability. But then when, you know, I get messages from people literally talking about some of the stuff you've just referenced, like they'll be saying stuff like, man, I'm going through a really dark time. So and such has just happened in my life. You know, even some people message me saying stuff like on my Facebook page or Instagram, like I was thinking about ending my life, man. And like, you know, I'm genuinely, and they'll be like, mate, your videos like, you know, have like over the years when I've been in my darkest times have like helped me laugh when, you know, things weren't going well for me. And like when I hear that and see that, man, like honestly, like it almost makes me cry, bro, because that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I love that stuff. It's always been what I love to do. I love making people laugh. I love making people happy. And it's a coping mechanism for me, but it's also a coping mechanism for so many others that I don't think that I really understood until quite recently. And then I was like, hey, I'm actually not just doing this for myself. I'm doing this for people out there who actually, you know, it genuinely makes an impact in their life, so much so that they can message me and say stuff like that. So yeah, you know, I've been doing this for a long time now and I can see the effect it's had on some people. And for some people, even just a small thing like that, like a, you know, 2-minute video or 1-minute video of me doing something outrageous can make their day. So, you know, that's pretty cool, powerful stuff.
Oh, mate, I couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, as you said, you don't start these things to do that. Like if I look at the podcast now and how it all came apart, how it all came about. But especially like of late, it's really solidified my purpose in terms of, I'm doing this for a career. And like you said, it's not a career where you're going to be making millions of dollars, but there's been times where like I have not wanted to do an episode. I've just been so busy and just been like, man, I just can't this week. Like I'm so flat out. Like I just can't do it. I can't do it. And then like I'll get a message from someone on Instagram and they're like, oh man, I had the worst week. Just like makes my day on a Tuesday when like you drop your podcast, and I was just like, fuck, I can't not do it now. Like I've got to go and like I've got to do it, because like when it becomes like not about you and it's about like if you can have some impact on other people, I think that's like the most special thing. And I know I alluded to this a lot, and I know you listened to the episode with Ben Crow, but we spoke about that sort of third stage where you can get to, and when you can think about other people and having impact on them. And man, like, look, I'm not saying this in a negative way, but like we're nothing special. Like we're literally just fucking just normal blokes, like literally just having a chat. But I and you've had some incredible emails, but like, man, I had an email from a mum last week, and it actually rocked me. Like I just could not like fathom like that. She I don't want to say what was in it, but like basically just explained that the messages that were coming through, that she was been trying to teach like her family, and someone had passed this on to her that probably needed to hear it. And oh man, it just like like to think that someone is actually benefiting from something that you can do is like, you can't buy that. Like that's just like, you can't, that's the probably the best feeling I've ever had like in my life.
Yeah, it's powerful, man, isn't it? And like, it's interesting, man. Like, I'm sure that you would have experienced it, because obviously your podcast has become so successful as well. Like, you touch so many people and you don't even consider it. You don't even think about it. Like, it's almost like an afterthought. You put it up and you're like, yeah, I'm going to put this up. You know what I mean? And like, it just goes to show the power of online as well, and like how strong digital media is becoming and how influential it is to so many people, because it's so accessible. And, I don't want to push you, even though I'm intrigued to find out, what was the content of that email. But I'm sure, whatever it was, it must have held a lot of weight, and it must have made you think. Like, surely you would have gone, wow, like maybe you hadn't factored that in before. And that's kind of similar to what happened with me when I get messages like that. I kind of go, wow, you don't even think about that kind of stuff. It's like a complete afterthought.
No, you don't. And I think it's funny because like, even after that, I thought, oh, I've got to do more of that. And then I thought, no, like, you don't have to, like, what, you're doing right now is, that's what you're doing, and that's what what I am doing. Like, what I'm doing because I love it. Like, you don't have to change what you're doing. I think that's why people respect things the most, is because you're just doing what you do. You're not trying to please someone else, but in some way someone can relate to it and learn from it. And that's why I love, talking to people like yourself, man, that have like incredible drive, and it hasn't always been easy to get to where they want to be. But like, I know for a fact that you're going to get there because you've got the drive, you've got the talent. But I think, as you said, man, you've got the life lessons, and you're not doing it. I think when you do something for not money, like, the money will come eventually, but like the impact is the real thing that actually is keeps you going with it, I think, long term for sure. But even on this, man, like, what would be some of those, like, life lessons is a strong word, and we're two just, as I said, everyday blokes. I fucking realistically, in the scheme of life, I've done absolutely nothing, but I love having conversations and learning from mistakes. Like, what would be some of your life lessons that you've learned along the journey?
I think, like, it's important to have like humility and perspective, I think, on a lot of things. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's one of the great things that comedy can teach you. It's like, it almost helps keep your ego in check, especially if you're writing a lot of new material and going to bars and, bombing and trying new stuff, because it makes you realize, like, it's not bad to fail, but it's also essential. And like, it's part of growth, and it's part of like who you are. So I think, like, not being afraid to try new things. Fear, holds so many people back. And I think there's so many people watching and listening to this who like probably have something that they've always wanted to do but have been too scared to do it. You've just got to back yourself and just know that like it's a process kind of thing. And it's like, you know, you don't have to be good to start, but you have to start to be good.
Oh,
it's like, you know what I mean? Like you have to go out there and do it. So I think just having a crack is something that I've learned it to be one of the most important things that you could do, because fear holds like everyone back, I think, or a lot of people back.
100%, man. I think, look, I always stuff these quotes up, but I was listening to something Jim Carrey said, on a video. I don't know Jim Carrey personally. This was just in an interview. And he said that like in his career, his dad was like really funny and he was a comedian. And he said something like, you know, his dad always, he didn't do comedy because he was too scared to fail at it. So he became an accountant and then basically, you know, had this long career and then got sacked and went bankrupt or something like that. And Jim Carrey he's like, well, why would you fail at something you don't want to do when you can fail at something you do want to do and at least have a crack at it like in the first time?
So true. Yeah.
And I was just like, fuck, that's so true, man. Like, you can fail at anything, but like, why wouldn't you just try and fail at the one thing you're going to do? Because the odds are, man, if you do it with conviction, you're probably not going to fail. And if you want to do it,
100%, man. And like, even if you do, you'll feel better for it. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if you do it, at least you can go, all right, I gave that a crack and I gave it everything that I could. And, you know, like, I think you regret the things you don't do rather than the things that you at least try to do. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to go out there and just like have a crack, because then even if no one else gives you the recognition or things that you were initially after, you'll be proud of yourself.
Love it. Love that. Mate, what's next for Elliot Loney? Like, you know, obviously big things on the horizon, man. Like, you've got some big plans. You alluded to before, but I think it'd be worth touching on a little bit more the animated series that I really want you to get going with, because that is going to be a massive win. Maybe a bit of context on that would be cool. And then obviously you got your podcast as well, the Elliot Loney podcast, which we spoke about. As soon as COVID's done, there's going to be more comedy shows and gigs that we're actually going to be allowed to go out and watch. But what's next for you, man? What's goals? Where do you want to get to?
I think like I've realised more recently now that, like, although I do like doing stand-up, and I think it's going to be something that I'll continue to pursue and try to better myself at and hone my craft, because it's just something I'm interested in. I think in a perfect world, like, I want to sort of align myself with, you know, the likes of Seth MacFarlane, and Trey Parker, Matt Stone, you know, the guys that created these vehicles that enabled them to like drive their success, kind of thing, if that makes sense. So like, rather than be the Elliot Loney, which would be great, don't get me wrong, like, I'd rather have something that I've put my heart and soul into, something really really well written, well put together, that I can then, you know, ride as like a, you know, I guess like use that to spearhead my own success, kind of thing. Like, I'd be more happy being known as, oh, that's the guy that made the prestigious 9As, than, oh, that's Elliot Loney. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I want to create something that, you know, can be enjoyed for generations. And I know that's like a big goal, and like, it's like, it sounds ridiculous. No, and even I sound a bit, I feel a bit ridiculous saying it, but like, I think that's the best use of my like unique skill set. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know many people that can do all these voices and do all these characters and stuff like that. So it, like, having an animation where I can like explore that and like play with that and use what I know I can do, seems to me like the best use of my time and the most likely chance of my success.
Oh, mate, 100%. And I know you don't believe it. I know you were being humble there, and you don't believe what you're saying, where it sounds silly, because I think you've got to believe it if you want it to happen, which it will. But man, I can see that happening. And just, again, I'm breaking these down into the tiniest parts here, but when you say animated series, it's basically like a cartoon animated series sort of shows. Like, when you say Seth MacFarlane, like of Family Guy, of these sort of things, you want to make an Australian version of that based on sports.
Yeah, I want to sort of make it around sport, and it's interesting because recently someone actually, I think that they were making a joke, but I got a few messages recently on Instagram of people sending me that new show Hoops, I think it is, on Netflix, with like a basketball coach around sport, like, you know, people being like lawsuit ? And I'm like, what? Like, no, but like, you know, there are already other sports animations out there, but my goal was initially to be the first sort of animated sports cartoon.
Yep.
Similar to South Park or Family Guy, but sports is the main theme.
Yeah.
And I still think that that's possible. But I think in order to have long-term success, something that I've discovered through my journey pursuing this is I'm going to have to make it more than just AFL if I want international appeal. Yeah. Because as much as I love AFL and I think it'd be great to have an AFL animation, and I think it's, you know, pivotal for the show's success, especially here in Australia. I want to make the first season AFL. I think long term, if I want to get the money that I need to actually make this thing a reality, I need to go to the US and do NFL, basketball, you know, maybe Canada, hockey, you know, all those sports that are big around the world, soccer, to try and get that international sort of appeal. So that's my North Star, so to speak. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. The most difficult thing is the money, because bloody hell, animation's expensive, mate. It's a joke.
Well, if we do have any cartoonists or animation experts out there that do want to get involved, make sure you reach out to Elliot, because that will be exciting and be a part of something special.
Absolutely, mate. If there's any animators watching this right now or listening, please get in touch. I need you.
Well, mate, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, bro. It's been cool to find, obviously, the funny side, but then obviously I've learned a lot today about you know, your career and your pathway, and I just love learning from like setbacks and how, you know, you overcome things as well, bro. So thanks so much for being so honest. Thanks for sharing. Can't wait to see this new series come to light, because I know it will, and can't wait for the premiere.
Nah, thanks, mate. Appreciate it, and love the podcast, and it's been a pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on.